Welcome to another video essay, and Battlefield has a lot to offer that you just can't get elsewhere. I say that completely seriously. No humor involved, I promise you. A large-scale battle experience combining infantry and vehicle combat, a wide array of options to tackle any given situation. Battlefield has many a unique aspect put together to create an experience that stands out when well executed. The problem is that statement doesn't always guarantee the outcome that's desired. EA and/or DICE have a history of erratic delivery when it comes to the quality of this game franchise, and it's arguably never been any worse situation than right now, putting truly unrivaled pressure upon Battlefield 6 to deliver with maximum impact come 2021. So here goes something most of you outside of the BF community won't have heard for a long time. Let's talk about Battlefield.
Looking in trouble over there.
Today is a great opportunity for me to combine my old content as an out-and-out Battlefield content creator with my new content as a game video essayist. My time as a Battlefield creator brought me to 48k subscribers. I currently have a goal of hitting 50k, so we're nearly there. If you enjoy this video and want to see more, hitting that subscribe button would be massively appreciated. Thank you so very much for considering it. So Battlefield 6, or whatever it ends up being called, 100% must not fail. It's that simple. Because Battlefield as a franchise likely can't pull through another poorly received title. Now, if you haven't followed Battlefield, you may feel like you haven't heard anything about it for ages, and you probably haven't. You may have a vague idea that BF5 didn't go very well, but you're likely questioning, well, specifically, what position has Battlefield 5 landed the franchise in? Why is it so important that Battlefield 6 does a fantastic job when released? Well, as I record this video, we're in August 2020, and BF5 has had its final content drop around 2 months ago. Content support ended really early, and we can't expect the next Battlefield until next year. To summarize that, it means this pretty massive AAA franchise will have had nothing to offer for a period of likely 12 to 18 months. That's potentially extremely damaging, as I'm sure many of you will understand. Just imagine that happening to COD or Destiny right now. So a common rebuttal will be, well, actually some big game series do have long periods where nothing new happens, and yes, that is true. Say Assassin's Creed and games of that nature, but it's not the same thing. They aren't games that have a massive focus on multiplayer usually, nor a live service to this degree. Battlefield is that now, or at least Battlefield 5 was that. A game marketed and sold as a live service game, which then had its live service ended way ahead of time, leaving Battlefield players with essentially nothing to tide them over. A situation they, of course, aren't used to. Now, obviously this isn't a good look. Obviously this erodes trust in the franchise. Obviously this means the next Battlefield game now has a truly massive weight on its shoulders. And so that's what happened, and the impact that's going to build and take hold over the coming months. But what of the situation right now? Where does Battlefield stand as I produce this video? Well, if we look at Twitch viewership at the time of making this video, there are just 363 people watching Battlefield 5 streams on that platform, a massive platform. This is an incredibly low number. It means that it has less viewership at this time than games such as Halo Master Chief Collection, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Mobile Legends Bang Bang, and Russian Fishing 4. Yes, that's a real game. Now, it must be said that Battlefield does tend to fare better for streaming on YouTube for whatever reason, and that will have an impact, but it doesn't change that it means the game has next to no representation on Twitch most of the time, which is a very important and influential platform, which means you're missing out on potential audience. And then on YouTube, the Broken Machine is likely the dominant force for Battlefield streaming, and he can now be found on Battlefield 1 a lot of the time rather than Battlefield 5. In fact, he started playing BF1, and other creators did as well, pretty early on in Battlefield 5's life cycle, and they kind of switched between. Something we didn't see during Battlefield 1, at least not early on. You do have Maxic, who does very regularly stream BF5, although there's no denying it absolutely makes him rage quite often. So what are video views? Well, as nearly a solely Battlefield content channel up until recently, let me tell you wholeheartedly that the viewership for Battlefield declined massively. And this has caused a huge amount of Battlefield creators to diversify, move on, or simply quit. So let's take the two creators that first come to mind for a lot of YouTube viewers, at least casual ones, when it comes to Battlefield. Westy and Jack Frags. What is their video output like right now? Well, if we take their previous 24 videos, because it's a solid measure and it also easily fits on the screen, we can see that for Westy, he's had one Battlefield 5 video in the past 24 and one Battlefield 4 video, and that's it. This is a guy who up until relatively recently was pretty much a 99% Battlefield channel. There was a little variety, but he was a dedicated Battlefield channel. So this massive turnaround shows just how much the Battlefield situation has altered. What of Jack Frags? Well, he's much more of a variety channel, has been for a long time, but he's absolutely had Battlefield as a key focus, and he's put out 2 BF5 videos, 1 BF4 video, and 1 BF3 video out of the past 24, and you can make your own conclusions about that. And so this near total lack of video content for Battlefield is of course to be expected. That's not a surprise bombshell. The point is that right now there's nothing at all for this series to point to for players, and that's unusual for a game of this nature. These are dangerous waters, a huge period of nothing keeping the game in players' minds. That has to be followed up with success, not another failure, and it's not the sort of thing that EA generally continue to put up with and support. And what really rams that point home to a publisher? Well, money, and what directly impacts their financial income, sales, and player numbers. So let's look at Steam first. At around the time of making this video, BF5 has 1,180 players currently playing worldwide on Steam, with average player numbers declining month on month in recent times. These are very low numbers, by the way, if you're not aware of that. We can also do BF1, as it was the next most recent Battlefield title, was a very successful one at the time, and was until recently being touted as the saving grace for players to return to. Well, it has 626 players playing on Steam currently, and average players dropped massively in recent months, showing that the BF1 resurgence was a temporary measure, something I myself was very sad about. Battlefield players aren't just switching BF games en masse, they're going elsewhere to play other games, and that's only going to continue until the next release. While we're on the topic of Steam though, the reviews for BF5 on that platform are defined as mixed, which is never a good sign, with many of the negative reviews referencing cheating issues as a major factor. Cheating problems have ravaged BF5 and absolutely must be addressed for Battlefield 6. Now, it must be said that it's quite possible there are more players on Origin than on Steam on PC, as it's an EA product, has been available on Origin for I believe a much longer period of time, there's Origin access, etc. But it's still not as if Steam is a small platform, and the downward trend is the important aspect to focus on. Anyway, that's just PC. What about PlayStation? Well, according to GameStat.com, there were 150,000 new BF5 users between the 26th of June and the 26th of July. That's users coming on to play the game for the first time. And this kind of figure usually gets thrown around as if it's some massive thing that makes any statement about the game failing or not being popular as being irrelevant. And I think that's a misunderstood aspect. So let's break that number down a bit, as it can be very misleading. The 26th of June to the 26th of July is 30 days. 150,000 new players divided by 30 is 5,000. So that's 5,000 new players per day for the whole world on PlayStation. Divide 5,000 by 24 for the hours in a day, and you get around 208 new players per hour, or around 3.5 people per minute. This figure includes people who try it briefly and turn it off, people that may never play the game ever again, people playing for free via EA Access if they subscribe to that service, and whatever else. And this number also doesn't change what the active player count actually is. Also notice that it says there are 99,000 returning players in the world on PlayStation for that month. Okay, let me just add an edit here, because I know if I don't say it, someone will pull me up on it. So yes, those players do need to have earned a trophy in the last month on the game, which will have some form of impact. So take the numbers again with a pinch of salt, as I've said for all of the numbers. But yeah, they give us a pretty solid idea, okay? Carry on. Which is less than the 150,000 new players, and overall less than 100,000 individual players returning for the month as a whole. One comparison point to work with? Well, there's Fallout 76, let's take. Released the same month as BF5, and a completely and understandably maligned game, seen as one of the worst AAA titles of all time by many. Well, for that game, only 43,000 new players for the same period, but it is a game with already much smaller player count, isn't on something comparable to EA or Origin Access, I believe, and still actually pulled more returning players during this month. Way less than new players, more returning players, loyal players, on Fallout 76. That tells you a lot. Or what about an even better comparison? Star Wars Battlefront 2, another EA product, and the game that was ended for Battlefield's future. Well, it pulled 1.4 million new players and 990,000 returning players. Tell me that isn't a massive deal. That really should put things into perspective. So anyway, that's PlayStation. On Xbox, I've done those numbers before in other videos. I'm not going to go into vast detail about it again. The trend is the same. I manually calculated them. They were very low and they dipped lower for the second video. When compared with the first, the trend is the same across all platforms. So let's look broader and take in sales for the series rather than just for an individual title like BF5. Using the video game sales wiki, which you can decide how reliable that likely is, because these are hard numbers to track as companies don't tend to make it overly public when games don't perform well. There's physical sales, digital sales, different lengths of time available, etc. But it will still give us a solid idea anyway. If we take the previous 4 entries of Battlefield, BF4 sold 13.8 million copies, but without a source reference to work with. Hardline sold 4.1 million copies, but again without a source reference, and was at the time seen as a pretty poor effort and a commercial failure. BF1 was a huge spike back to 25 million, with a source from about 2 years after its release, which also plays into, by the way, companies being much more willing to publish when games sell well than when they don't sell well, which might explain the low numbers for some of these Battlefield games. They may actually be higher, but not that much higher, otherwise they would have been published. But back to the point, Battlefield 5 then fell back to 7.3 million, but with a source from about 6 months after release. These aren't even comparisons, but they are still a good indicator based upon the rate at which games are purchased and how that drops off pretty rapidly after a few months. And so with that in mind, the drop from BF1 to BF5 is pretty striking. Whether you agree with the numbers completely or not, it's well documented that BF1 was a huge success and BF5 didn't really come anywhere near it. And overall, that shows the inconsistency of this series. And considering the length of the gap between games in this series, it's pretty obvious again that BF6 has to be a huge bounce back. Otherwise, it's many years in a row of Battlefield having a bad reputation within the gaming community, which hurts sales even more. And as I said before, publishers don't tend to support a series that becomes more of a long-term burden than a money-making force. Look at Medal of Honor, another EA title by the way. It basically stopped being able to compete with other games in the genre. It's finally getting a new release this year, a VR title, and it's been 8 years since the last Medal of Honor. A former titan of the FPS genre hasn't been around for 8 years. Battlefield doesn't want that fate. Now on the plus side, the development of this game does have a lot working in its favor. It's got the sizable amount of time that we've been talking about for the team to focus in on producing a quality product, with nothing else we're aware of for them to deal with, as long as there aren't any surprises in the pipeline. They then have the benefit of seeing what worked for Battlefield 1 and what didn't for Battlefield 5 straight afterwards. A competent management team should be able to take that vast amount of information and make good use of it. There's also that Star Wars Battlefront 2 was brought to a close, meaning it really looks like an all-hands-on-deck kind of effort, with Star Wars Battlefront 2 having been an incredible success story of pulling back from the brink of utter failure, a topic that without doubt deserves its own video essay at some point, and indeed BF6 will have the new console generation to work with as well. These are all things that many will point to as being reasons why BF6 should do exactly what's needed. Now what is unclear is how the DICE studios are now aligned, as DICE LA is being altered and reshaped under Vince Zampella to likely become something else entirely, and with apparently a new game in the pipeline which many of us are very excited about. It must also be said though that some other uncertainties do still exist and are troubling. It's unclear how the management structure in place for the development of Battlefield 6 is shaping up. As I said, they need a competent management team. Battlefield 5 was brought down primarily by arrogant, ignorant, and self-serving management. There can be no room for that, nor the rampant cronyism that's been reported from within DICE Stockholm during Battlefield 5. If those aspects aren't altered, then BF6 could also suffer a fate that no fans want to see. The series just doesn't look capable of withstanding that kind of outcome anymore. DICE need to buck the trend of releasing Battlefield with so many problems and then trying to fix them afterwards. This time, Battlefield 6 needs to release in a good state and maintain it. Otherwise, the worrying, the negative coverage and all that stuff starts up again, and that now familiar downward spiral has the opportunity to take hold once again. And so, I am hopeful, but not expectant. We don't know how this will turn out, but we do know that what must happen for the future of this series is Battlefield 6 has to deliver. And so I ask, what do you think about all of that? What do you hope for and expect from Battlefield 6? let me know in the comments below, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leaving a like is huge. Subscribe if you're new or haven't done so before for loads more content, video essays, live gameplays, etc. I really appreciate it. And all the links to my social media, including Patreon, can be found in the description and my pinned comment, where if you do support me on Patreon, you'll join the board of awesome you're seeing right here with all of the epic people that already do so. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and of course often. And with all of that said, I am GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. But enough exposition. Your campaign difficulty level is set based upon your performance in a gauntlet at the start, which is part of your basic training. It's fun, potentially addictive as it is timed,